All right. Sorry, I want to write all this stuff out so you guys could see it and have it in front of you. Um, we went over the practice quiz in class together. I'm not gonna go over that one. Instead, I'm gonna go over the two new practice quizzes that I regenerated at some point today. They're exactly the same. They're just regenerated. As you have questions, just go ahead and ask. I'll try and explain this as best as I can as we go through it. But yeah, we'll just start at 1, go down to whatever number, 12. And then I have another one here where if people need questions or people want to see some extra practice, we can do that as well. The first, well, the majority of this quiz, so 1 through 10, has to do with everything that I have written here. You need to know the angle positions, you need to know what they mean, and you need to know what happens if these two lines are parallel. So all these are the same positions, but if these two lines are parallel, then these positions means different things. So if these two lines are parallel, all these angles are congruent. So A is congruent to E, B is congruent to F, C is congruent to G, and D is congruent to H. If the two lines are parallel, the consecutive interior angles add up to 180. If the two lines are parallel, the alternate interior angles are also congruent. And then if the lines are parallel, then the alternate exterior lines are angles are also congruent. So those are like the rules you actually need to know. You don't need to know the exact wording of the theorems. You don't need to know the names of the theorems, but you need to know, well, you kind of need to know the names of the theorems as a reason. But for corresponding angles are congruent, your reason would just be corresponding angles of parallel lines are congruent. There will be no proofs on the quiz. That's going to be on the exam, which we will work on after the quiz tomorrow and on Thursday. And you will have examples of that, but we're not going to work on that right now. The first thing I want you to do is just understand and be able to do this stuff. All right. So if we understand those rules that I just said and what all these angles mean and their relationship to others, then honestly you should be okay. All right. So keep in mind the directions say to state the angle relationship and then solve for x. So there are two parts to every question. First, state the angle relationship. So starting on number 1, these two angles are corresponding angles, and these two lines are parallel. So because they're corresponding angles of parallel lines cut by a transversal, they are congruent to one another, which means their angles or their angle measures are the same. So these are corresponding. And we can set 16x plus 2 equal to 10 plus 15x. And then we just solve. So I would subtract 15x from both sides. So we get x plus 2 is equal to 10. Subtract 2 from both sides, so we get x is equal to 8. Number 2, these two angles are inside the two parallel lines. So we're talking about one of the interior angled relationships, but they're on opposite ends of the transversal, which means we are talking about alternate interior angles. Because we are talking about alternate interior angles and these two lines are parallel, that means they're going to be congruent. So we set 3x plus 19 is equal to 52. Subtract 19 from both sides. To get 33. Divide by 3 to get 11. Yes, you'll get a practice exam. Hopefully I'll have that out by Wednesday. That way you guys can at least look at it before Thursday, spend some time on Thursday, and then we can go over questions. On number 3, the angles we are dealing with are outside of the two parallel lines, and they're opposite ends of the transversal. So these two angles are alternate exterior. Because we are dealing with alternate exterior angles of two parallel lines cut by a transversal, we know that these two things are equal to one another. So 120 will equal x plus 129. Subtract 129 from both sides, so x will equal negative 9. Number 4, we're dealing with interior angles, and they are on the same side of the transversal, so we're dealing with consecutive interior angles. Again, because we are dealing with two parallel lines cut by a transversal, that means that the consecutive interior angles will add up to 180. So if we add these two things together, they will equal 180. So if we combine some like terms, we get 18x plus 18 is equal to 180. 18x will equal 162. and x will equal, I believe, 9. Number 5, this is one you just gotta keep an eye out. These are vertical angles because they are on opposite sides of one another. Because they are vertical angles, we know that their measures are the same. So we can set 15x minus 5 equal to 13x plus 9, and then just solve for x. So I would subtract 13x from both sides to get 2x, add 5 to get 14, and then divide by 2 to get 7. Number 6. Again, this is one you have to keep an eye out on. These two angles form a linear pair because their opposite rays form a straight line. Because they are a linear pair, they are also supplementary, which means they add up to 180 degrees. So x plus 135 plus x plus 65 is equal to 180. So 2x plus 200 is equal to 180. Subtract 200 from both sides, so 2x is equal to negative 20, so x is equal to negative 10. Number 7 through 10, the directions change just a little bit. These say find the measure of the indicated angle that makes lines U and V parallel. I still want you to describe these two relationships, and then we can answer that question. So these two angles are on the outside of the two lines, and they are on opposite sides of the transversal. So these are alternate exterior. Because they are alternate exterior, if these two things are equal, then the two lines are parallel. So we'd set 70 equal to x. So this angle right here has to equal 70 degrees for lines U and V to be parallel. Those are the converse theorems that we went over. That was like the last day of actual content. So they work both ways. If those two angles are equal, then the two lines are parallel. If the lines are parallel, then those two angles are equal. They work both ways. That would be a biconditional statement. You don't need to know that for this quiz, but you will need to know it for the exam. All right, number 8. These are on the same sides of the transversal, and they are interior, so these are consecutive interior. In order for two lines to be parallel when they're cut by a transversal, the sum of the two consecutive interior angles have to add up to 180. So 75 plus our unknown has to equal 180. So if we subtract 75 from both sides, we get x is equal to 105. Similar, 7 and 9 are basically the same thing. They're alternate exterior. And in order for these two lines to be parallel, these two angles have to be the same. So 115 will equal our unknown. And then kind of the same thing from number 10, except we were dealing with alternate interior angles. So again, those two things have to be the same. And then numbers 11 and 12. For whatever reason, I think these will be the ones you guys struggle with the most, even though that shouldn't be the case. In order to do these efficiently, you need to know slope-intercept form, where B is the intercept and M is the slope. And if you want to make your life a lot easier, you need to know point slope form. Where M is the slope, and then x1, y1 is the point. And then this might pop up. In order to find M no matter what, we take the difference between the y's and divide it by the difference in the x's. Okay, so if we do this, we have a point, negative 5, 5. So this is x1, y1. And we have a slope, or at least evidence of a slope. So we want parallel to negative 9 over 4. So because we're parallel, it has to be the same slope. So our new slope is negative 9 over 4. So we have M, and we have x1, y1. Because I don't specify which equation to use, personally I would just use point slope because that doesn't require really any math. So if we plug in y1, we get y minus 5 is equal to negative 9 over 4, x, and then minus a negative 5, which you can simplify to plus 5. And then you're done. I don't have a Quizlet. I've had this on the board like 4 times. I would consider that my sheet. It is also in your book, and it's also right here if you want to look at it. The best way to think about these is literally just by the names. Alternate means opposite sides of the transversal. Interior means inside the 2 lines. Exterior means outside. Consecutive means same side. And then corresponding means same position. That sounds like a lot. It's really not. This is everything that's going to be on the quiz. So last one, number 12. Again, we have a point x1, y1. And this time we're talking about perpendicular to x equals 0. This isn't a great question because it doesn't give you any equation. But perpendicular to x equals 0 would just be y equals 0. So the slope would be 0. But it's a little bit trickier. But we can still write it. So y plus 2 we equals 0 times x minus 0, y plus 2 equals 0, so y is equal to negative 2. Again, not the greatest example, but same idea that's going to be on the quiz. So that's the entirety of the quiz. So right now, you have the practice quiz that you did in class on Friday, which you also have the answers to, and this, which you have everything worked out to. I have another regenerated version that I can go over. Before I do that, or if I do that, if you guys need it, are there any questions over this one? Y is equal to 0 because we're talking about the line perpendicular to x equals 0. So if we just draw that, x equals 0 would be a vertical line through x equals 0. And we have some point negative 5, 5. And it has to be perpendicular to that red line. So this dotted line would be our new line. Again, this isn't the greatest example because I don't give you another slope or anything like that. But it's the same concept, just a little bit trickier. The quiz is exactly the same as this length. Okay, I'm gonna just insert this other regenerated test. I'm just gonna do that without voice, and if you guys have questions, just put it in chat and I'll answer it as I go. So I went over all of this with voice. I explained every step. Also explained every step on the practice test that you got on Friday. So I will do another one, and I will explain every question if I need to. But for right now, I'm just going to do it, and as I go, you guys can ask questions. All right. That's, I guess, the third generated practice quiz. Are there any questions over anything I just did? And Sam, this is stuff we started last week. So there's been homework on this, so we should be able to do it. Okay. Since there are no questions, I'm gonna quickly go over this real quick again. Um, Lines with transversals. All right. So in this diagram, we have two lines that may or may not be parallel with a line that cuts through both of them at different points. That is called the transversal. And that transversal forms 8 different angles. And you need to know the relationships between those angles. So I labeled them A through H, and then we labeled their relationships to other angles. So corresponding angles are angles with the same position in terms of quadrants as another. Okay. So angle A is in the same position that angle E is in. Angle B is in the same position that angle F is in. Angle C is in the same position as angle G. And angle D is in the same position as angle H. So all of those are corresponding pairs. Now, if these two lines are parallel, that means that these angles are congruent. So if blue is true, then this blue is true as well. All right, so if the two lines are parallel, the corresponding angles are going to be congruent. Also, if the corresponding angles are congruent, that means that the two lines are parallel. The other relationship we have are alternate interior angles. And if you just focus on the name, you can get the angles. All right, so alternate means opposite sides of the transversal. Interior means inside the two lines. Okay, so C is opposite F, and they're both interior, so those are alternate interior angles. Again, if the two lines are parallel, then angle C and angle F are congruent, and angle D and angle E are also congruent. Also, if we don't know that the lines are parallel, but we do know that those pairs are congruent, then the lines are parallel. Then we have alternate exterior. So again, alternate means opposite sides of the transversal. Exterior, though, means outside of the two lines. So angle A is alternate exterior to angle H. Angle G is alternate exterior to angle B. Okay, and if those two lines are parallel, if the two green lines are parallel, then angle A is congruent to angle H, and angle G is congruent to angle B. If we don't know that the lines are parallel, but we do know that the alternate exterior angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. So those things work both ways. All right. So for example, if angle A is congruent to angle E, then we know that the lines are parallel. If we know the lines are parallel, then we know that angle D plus angle H is equal to angle H. Okay. So I got just a little bit off track there. The last one are consecutive interior angles. So consecutive means same side of the transversal. Interior means inside the two lines. Okay. And consecutive interior angles, if the two lines are parallel, then the sum of the two consecutive interior angles is going to be 180. So angle C plus angle E will equal 180. Angle D plus angle F will equal 180. And then the same thing is true. If we don't know that those lines are parallel, but we do know that the sum of those two things is 180, then they're parallel. Okay, and if we know that, and we know how to write equations of a line, then we should be able to do this quiz pretty well. Okay, so there's not a whole lot of content. Really, most of it is just understanding the angle pair relationships and what they actually mean when two lines are parallel. Again, I'm not asking you to prove anything right now. I'm just asking you to use this information and tell me different measures of different angles. So I'll leave this open for the next like 5 or so minutes. If there's no questions after that, then I will shut it down. But again, feel free to ask questions. Feel free to email me as well. And then I will also be there tomorrow morning at around 7:30, 7:40. Okay, so if we have questions, you can always ask me then as well. All right. Since there are no other questions, I'm going to shut this down. You can always rewatch it if you need to. And again, you can always email me. You can always come in tomorrow morning and ask me questions. All right. So thank you and have a good night.